There can be numerous reasons for someone in New York to potentially have their wages garnished. But the question is, do you have any options to potentially stop it? Well, actually, depending on your situation, sometimes having your wages garnished could unfortunately put you in a financial hardship. For example, let's say someone in New York here makes a minimum wage of $13-20 an hour, and they're now having their wages garnished for a $25,000 unpaid debt. Now, they may be put into a hardship now where they're considering whether to file bankruptcy. That's what we're going to cover in today's video. Welcome to Ascend Finance's YouTube channel, where we cover wage garnishment in New York and help folks understand their options to resolve it. Now, with that said, everyone's situation is unique, and we know that. And so we built a free New York wage garnishment calculator to help folks see what their options are to stop it, compare the pros and cons to each option, and estimate the cost based on their personalized data. My name is Justin, and I am one of the analysts here at Ascend. I speak with quite a few folks who are unfortunately facing a garnishment. And so I'd love to help you understand the process and your options. In today's video, we're going to cover a few things. The first thing is going to be the options to stop a garnishment. The next thing is going to be covering the laws, so the New York wage garnishment laws. And then I'm going to dive into what the wage garnishment process in New York looks like, and then steps to finding out who is garnishing your wages in case you're not sure, as well as finally I'm going to end it with which option may be best. Now, before I dive into the different ways to stop a garnishment in New York, I do want to say that if this video ends up being helpful, feel free to leave a like, as it's definitely always encouraging for us to see. And as well as if you end up wanting to see more videos like this, where we're covering wage garnishment and different options to resolve debt in New York, well, feel free to subscribe, as we're definitely trying to put out new videos weekly. Now, let's get started. So we understand that you may be feeling overwhelmed. And one of the most important things to understand is how to stop it, as it may be debilitating. And so we built a New York wage garnishment calculator to help you understand either A, how much you're being garnished, or B, if you're currently being garnished, determining whether that is the correct amount. And as well, the calculator helps you understand the options to stop a garnishment. Now, I want to touch on the different options to stop a garnishment in New York. Sadly, when it comes to stopping a garnishment, there are unfortunately a limited number of options, as at this point, the court has already issued an order for an unpaid debt. However, there are options to consider. So let's dive into those. First, filing bankruptcy. So one option to stop a garnishment is filing a bankruptcy. Now, there's a few different chapters, but there is the liquidation bankruptcy, known as Chapter 7, which can potentially provide immediate relief from the garnishment and any other unsecured debt if you have any. But in order to file a Chapter 7, you do need to qualify. You need to pass, the bankruptcy means test there in New York. Now, there are income requirements based on your household size. And so I want to show on the screen now what the current income limits are for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy in New York. So for instance, as of today, you can see that for a household of one, it's about, I think it's $62,715. And for a household of four, it's $116,818. Now, you can see how it incrementally goes up, but for more up-to-date figures, and even if you want to see if you qualify, because sometimes you can pass the test even if you're above the threshold. So if you want to see the up-to-date figures and if you're able to qualify, you can actually take our Chapter 7 calculator. It's free. It'll help you estimate qualification and cost. The goal there is to help you understand whether you qualify for a Chapter 7, what the cost looks like based on your zip code, and your personalized data. And so you don't even need to put in an email address to see your results. We want you to be able to comparatively see all your options, but also see if you qualify for free. Now, the Chapter 7 filing fee in New York is $338. However, you actually may be able to get that waived if you're under the fee poverty guidelines. And so that's what I'm going to put up on the screen here as well. And you can see based on the number of people and what the income threshold is and what the guideline is for poverty there. Now, if let's say you're not ready to do bankruptcy, or it doesn't make sense to do it for any reason, or if you just want to try an option first, one other option you could look into is potentially trying to file an exemption through the court. And so you could potentially reach out to your local courthouse to see if you may be eligible for any exemption. So for example, you may be able to file a head of household exemption, which actually may be able to limit how much they're able to withhold from your paycheck. So it's something to look into maybe beforehand, or maybe if bankruptcy doesn't make sense, it's just something else to consider. Now, with that said, there should be a limit on how much New York can garnish your wages. Now, with that said, I want to talk about the New York wage garnishment laws. Now, in New York, there should be a limit on how much they're able to withhold. Depending on the state, it's generally generally based on disposable earnings. However, this is how the wage garnishment amount is calculated in New York. It's a little bit more complex than other states sometimes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the description what the laws are there. I'm going to link an article we wrote about it that goes into detail. Basically, it talks about, and we'll put it on the screen here. But basically, what it helps you understand is how that's going to calculate what they're looking at in terms of disposable week versus maybe for the month, whether it's 30 times greater than the federal minimum hourly wage, all of those different things. And it's a hair complex. And it's a lot to swallow. So I rather just put it down in writing for you to see. I'm on the screen, in the description, and in the article. Now, when it comes to a wage garnishment, the actual process of it really depends on the type of debt actually being collected, as there's actually potentially specific procedures for garnishing someone's wages for, child support or spousal support, to compare to maybe like credit card debt. So with that all said, though, the process is generally similar across the board for collecting unpaid unsecured debt. So let's kind of get into what the process looks like for reaching at, a wage garnishment for something like that. Now, the first thing they're going to have to do is most likely obtain a judgment against you. And so wage garnishments don't happen overnight, right? And so fortunately, there are checks and balances put in place to protect both the debtor and the creditor from doing anything with ill intent. So if you are facing a garnishment from, let's say, the federal government, maybe for like an unpaid student debt, the process may look a bit different, as they may not need to actually have a court order to withhold your earnings, but nevertheless, let's focus on, regular traditional unsecured debt. So the first step to obtaining a judgment is through a debt collection lawsuit. So the creditor will need to properly serve you for any unpaid unsecured debt. So that's going to probably include credit cards, medical bills, and personal loans, payday loans, of course, and things of that nature. So once you've received the summons, you should see a few things. First, the facts of the case, right? And so you should see a summary of the law, the description of the debt, and the exact amount that you owe. And so most times you should actually have about 30 days to respond, but it should state what that is on the summons. Now, let's say, the creditor has enough documentation provide sufficient proof, right? And so they have enough proof that you owe the debt. The court now may issue a default judgment. So with the judgment, though, the creditor now has the choice to whether they want to pursue further legal action by maybe requesting a wage garnishment order. So that is the next step here in the process, is actually obtaining a wage garnishment order. So now that we've actually touched on what it looks like to obtain a judgment, I want to kind of go through what the next step of it looks like and kind of what it looks like to obtain a wage garnishment order. So as I just alluded to, with the judgment, the creditor is now able to potentially request a wage garnishment order. So here's what that looks like. The first thing is the creditor is going to request a writ of execution from the court. The next thing is there's going to be a garnishment packet served to your employer. Now, once the employer has received the garnishment packet, you may actually start to see your wages being garnished, probably, in the first paycheck you've received 10 days after the service. So once your employer has received the garnishment packet, you may actually start to see your wages being garnished in the first paycheck you receive. That's about 10 days after the date of being served. And so your employer may need to provide you with a copy of the garnishment order. And so you should be able to challenge this order, but you may only have around 10 days to ask for any potential exemptions. Now, sometimes folks are not even aware that they are being garnished, who's garnishing, or what the balance is for, and for many, many reasons, unfortunately. So before I go too much further, I want to help you figure out where to go if you either don't know who's garnished your wages or you're not sure the balance they're garnishing you for. I've actually spoken with more and more folks who have unfortunately been caught off guard by a recent garnishment from their wages. Most times they're first hearing about it from being notified by their employer, or they just noticed a portion of their paycheck was being taken out. And so if you do fall into this category, I want to help you understand a few simple steps that may help you actually answer those questions and get a little bit more understanding. Of course, if you already know who's garnishing your wages and the total balance, feel free to skip to the next part here, more covering your options to resolve it as well that I touched on earlier. But if you don't know who's garnishing your wages or what the balance is, here are some steps to take if you need more information. So one step could be, it's depending on everyone's situation, but one step could be reaching out to payroll and seeing if they have any information on who submitted the garnishment order. Most likely them or someone within your employer has information or the documents that they were served. Now, once you know who is garnishing your wages, you should be able to call them directly to get the information on the balance. So once you have an idea of the law firm that's handling the account, you could potentially reach out to them and get an idea of the balance, when it started, how much they want, if there's any offers to resolve. Or if that doesn't work for any reason, you could potentially reach out to the courthouse and see if they're able to look up your case. If you call the local courthouse, they may have the case information regarding the judgment and the garnishment issued. Of course, there's no promises on any of these, but those could be options to explore. Now, if both of those options don't work, you may be able to check your credit report and see if there's any outstanding debts that it may be in relation to. So if you have a medical bill from 4 years ago that is in collections and you haven't paid on it and your wages are being garnished and you look in the credit report and you see there's a medical bill in collections, well, it could be that, but those are things to check out. Now, the multiple question here is which options should you do? Now, with all that to say, ultimately it's up to you. However, I would encourage you to take our wage garnishment calculator, as that'll help you compare your options, the cost, the pros and cons to handling a potential garnishment. As I do understand that it can be overwhelming, you're always welcome to give us a call or text at 833-272-3631, and we'd be happy to chat through your situation. I do hope that this video was helpful, but if you do have any questions at all, feel free to leave a comment down below, as I am sure there are others with a similar question. We will do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. However, thanks so much for watching, and I'm always here if you have any questions.